Hello, Dr. Liu, and potentially the rest of the class. My name is Mackenzie Roberts, and I will be speaking on Hennes and Mauritz, or more commonly known as H&M. H&M was founded by a man named Erling Pearson. He was born on January 21st, 1917, and he ended up staying in Sweden his entire life. He had two sons, Stephen and Sean, and one daughter, Lottie. It was known that he was intrigued by the business world, but he could never find a business idea that he thought that would be successful. Obviously, he ended up coming up with H&M, and we will discuss how that ended up happening. So how it started. He ended up having an eye-opening experience whenever he visited the United States after World War II. He went back to Sweden with the idea of opening up a women's clothing store named Hennes in 1947, and that is shown in the bottom right picture. Right there, you can just see it's named Hennes. At that point in time, he only provided women's clothing whenever he first opened, and then in 1968, he felt that there was a demand for the men's clothing, and so he paired up with a man named Mauritz Wildress, a hunting apparel retailer, and that kind of added the men's aspect, so then it became Hennes and Mauritz. Obviously, they don't supply hunting apparel, but they just kind of collaborated together to make the men's and kids' clothing on that aspect. So the initial market was first only intended for the women, and he just felt like there was a demand for fashionable clothing at a reasonable price, and so that's what he wanted to offer. And then, like stated earlier, that switched to women, men, and kids of all ages, but the target market was still focused on the women, and this was because the women would obviously be the ones that would show up, and then they wanted their husbands to look fashionable as well, so then they would buy things for their husband and their children. Although there were men and children that would sometimes shop there, but it was just solely focused still on the women. Altogether, they just supplied clothing and accessories and shoes. So now we can look a little bit into the global expansion. In 1976, the first store outside of Sweden was opened in London, and then by the 1980s, stores opened in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, and France. By March 31st in 2000, the first United States store was opened on Fifth Avenue in New York. And if you've ever been to New York, you know that this store is amazing. There's 5 levels, I believe, and it is just packed and packed and packed with clothing and accessories, and it is just awesome. And it provides a lot of clothing for a lot of people. So the strengths of this company, so they were able to expand their company globally in a very efficient way. Obviously, they were making money and they were making a profit if they were able to expand to that many countries that quick. It did take them a while to expand to the United States, and I just think that's because they wanted to make sure they made enough profit, in the other regions to then feel confident enough to go into a bigger market like the United States. And since the beginning, they made a promise to sell fashionable clothing at an affordable price, and they still honor that promise. If you go and shop there today, you can tell that, the clothing is fashionable, and it is some of the cheapest clothing you can find that's actually in good quality. And they're always seen as loyal and respectful. If you go and Google their name, they have a very high rating everywhere. Obviously, they're going to have, a few setbacks with customers that are unhappy, but that happens at every store. And they're innovative and creative. As you can see in this picture, it just looks very creative, and I would have never been able to capture a picture like that. So that just kind of gives you a grasp of, how they've been throughout the years. And then the difficulties the company faced. So early on, J. Crew and Coach were the other two popular brands against H&M. Coach, still to this day, mainly provides purses and that type of accessories. So I felt like their main competitor was J. Crew, because J. Crew would offer, similar clothing, but H&M always kind of beat them on the price, and so that was obviously one of their advantages. And then in 2010, H&M developed an online platform that had a lot of problems and was difficult to use. This was seen as a problem to H&M because there were companies like Abercrombie and Finch and Zara that, had figured that whole thing out, and so that just gave them a setback. That was not good. And so that is my presentation. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Dr. Liu, for being so patient with me, not being able to be in class. Hopefully I can be back soon. Thank you.